guys, I'm back as promised, and this time going over your OT personal statement. Now, I previously recorded this video and it just wasn't working out for me. I actually recorded it at night, and so of course I didn't have lighting and it was just bad quality overall. So this video probably won't be up until after you've already gotten access to OTCAS, but for the most part, your next step is to write your personal statement, and you're wondering what are the best ways to go about writing that personal statement, what needs to be in it, how long does it need to be, and other things like that. So I'm here to go over some of the tips that I used when writing my personal statement that I feel like ultimately got me accepted. But yeah, other than that, let's jump into the video. Alright, so the first tip that I have for you is to sit down and brainstorm your why. And at first you're probably thinking, well, what do you mean? And that was basically my first thought when I first heard that. I actually heard that from one of my undergraduate professors, and we were discussing how hard it is to get into a postgraduate level school, whether it be for nurse practitioner, even getting into nursing school, but occupational therapy, physical therapy, things that just require a lot more effort than your general degree. And we were going over how to make yourself stand out in those types of competitive environments, and she mentioned knowing your why. And when I say that is how you came to this profession, and ultimately of course why you want to be in that profession. So for example, after sitting down with myself and really trying to pinpoint exactly why I came into this profession, it wasn't just about helping people. For me, it eventually became the fact that I saw a lot of things that I felt could have been improved in terms of healthcare. So for example, and you can also have multiple whys as well, but I'll explain later on. But one of my whys was seeing the hardships that my grandparents went through being immigrants who came from Mexico. For them, they weren't blessed with the luxuries of, having insurance and, having a lot of the healthcare, or I guess quality of healthcare as immigrants. They just couldn't afford it. And so those were things that were some whys that came through my background and ultimately put me on this road towards healthcare. And so you may want to ask yourself, what is my why? It can't just be, well, I want to help people. Yeah, that's everybody's answer. So in a sense, when evaluators go and they read through all of these applicants, a lot of them are going to be like, well, I want to help people. And essentially that's not good enough. So really sit down with yourself, brainstorm, get yourself a notepad or something like that, and think about how you came to be in this position. And then roll that way. Did your dad have a stroke? And, he had to learn the ability to walk again, or was somebody a quadriplegic in your family? Are you a sibling to someone who has autism? Think about things like that, and that's essentially what goes into your personal essay and will ultimately make you stand out in the end. Another tip that I came across and that I would definitely suggest to everyone is to avoid rambling on. Everyone typically thinks that they have to put everything on paper so that all of the evaluators know how passionate they are about getting into occupational therapy school or graduate school or whatever. So, they feel tempted to list every single thing that they did or that they're currently doing so that they stand out from others. And in a sense, it's like, it backfires on you because either the evaluators get bored reading those things or, they just don't in general. So try to be clear and concise. There are definitely ways that you can combine things. If you feel a special need, to have to clarify, one experience, definitely do that, but try to, in a way, condense everything down. And by this, I actually want to show you my personal essay, and it is just 1 page long. It's actually divided into 4 different subsections, and let me just say that there's no formula, you know, that says that something needs to be in the introduction, or, you know, your experiences need to be in the second paragraph. You know, there's nothing like that. But I just kind of wanted to go over what mine looks like. And so, yeah, so the first thing, you know, I explained how I came into occupational therapy. And me personally, from the beginning, I got into occupational therapy because I was a student athlete. So I became interested in the rehabilitation processes of injury. So that was my first initial boom. And so as my life progressed and as I grew, that's when a lot of the other things came into play, like my grandparents. You know, I had an aunt that was in a car accident and had to go through therapy. My grandmother actually, you know, had her lower leg amputated because of diabetes, you know, things like that. So try to condense that down into one basic paragraph. And so the next thing that I did was I talked about my educational career, you know, starting in high school, and it was a couple sentences because, you know, you don't want to elaborate that much about high school because, you know, it's kind of in the past. But I went on to basically say things that were relevant to the occupational therapy profession. So I was a part of like a health care academy program during high school. So I listed that there. I talked a little bit about my experiences in, you know, observational hours, like where I did them, what types of populations did I observe, what else, the organizations that I was involved in during college, my community volunteer work, and the types of populations that I saw there. But that was all compacted into the second paragraph. You know, I didn't elaborate and I didn't ramble on about it later on. And the third paragraph, although short, and it may apply to some and others it won't, but I didn't get into occupational therapy school until after graduation. So I had a job for 2 years as a special education aide. And since I was always planning to go back to school for occupational therapy, I talked about my employment and how it related to occupational therapy. But other than that, my last paragraph was just kind of wrapping everything up and why I still feel that my background ultimately leads me to a profession in occupational therapy, and how I think that I'm a good candidate for this type of program and profession. But other than that, yeah, it's just one page. So the next tip I have for you is in terms of thinking about things that either you observed during your observation hours, or even if you worked in these types of settings, to where you saw either an injustice that pertains to occupational therapy or whatever you're applying for, and how do you want to go about leaving your mark or improving those injustices as a future healthcare professional. So for example, me as a special education aide, I saw a lot of lack of early intervention in terms of kids being diagnosed earlier if, you know, they were to have a disability. For example, I remember one of my students in particular came in with no verbal skills. You know, we didn't know how to evaluate them from a educator standpoint. Of course, I know that they have diagnosticians and, you know, things like that, but, you know, we couldn't properly evaluate him on our end with what was his academic ability. You know, did he know his primary colors? You know, did he know how to count to 10? You know, basic level things that children or would be expected to know in kindergarten. So that's what I saw. So what then I elaborated on in my personal statement, if that were valid either in the general OTCAS statement or a supplemental application, if they were to ask you this question, elaborate on how you can help, you know. And so I elaborated on, you know, I would want to eventually create either a early preschool for children with disabilities, to where, you know, they will not only learn academically at their own success rates, but as well as socially, behaviorally, you know, all of those things that are typically dealt with once those kids get into school. you know, but why not try to give them that chance before entering school? You know, ultimately, if they were to be successful before reaching that kindergarten state, they will then have the patience, the knowledge, the behavioral skills, social skills to be more successful when they go into public school. So that's how essentially I wanted to help that situation. So not only did I see an injustice, I had a plan of how to fix it or how I could contribute. The last thing I want to talk about, and although it might seem kind of cliche, but it's to be 100% you and to be consistent. So with that being said, I know a lot of times you feel like you have to amplify your experiences in order to stand out from others and other applicants. However, you almost have to know your personal statement like the back of your hand. So if you were to get an interview, for example, they would expect that be the time that you elaborate on your general statement, you know, if it's 1 page long, okay? But what else? You know, during the interview, that's when you express, you know, other things that you didn't get a chance to put into your personal statement. But this is also where I have to caution some people, because if you tend to over amplify your experiences to where you actually didn't fully understand what neuro was, if you amplified your experience in neuro, or, you know, if you just didn't do observational hours, but you talked about it in your personal statement, you know, when those evaluators read your profile, that's what they expect you to come in and talk about. Because in a sense, they already kind of have a feeling of who you are and expect certain things to come out of your mouth when they go back and they see, you know, well, did they talk about pediatrics like they did in their personal statement, and, you know, did they elaborate on that? So if it's not 100% consistent, they're gonna see it, and it's gonna come across as either being false or just you just not having the basic understanding of what you put into your essay. So be careful and just make sure that you are consistent across the board. But other than that, that was basically some of the things that I used in order to write my occupational therapy personal statement. Like I said, there is no formula to writing the perfect statement. I just kind of shared some of the things that I did in terms of writing my personal statement and what I believed made me stand out, especially when I reflected on those injustices like I mentioned before, as well as being able to pinpoint my why and talking about that specifically. You know, your why may be concerning, you know, your father or whoever in your family, but make that personal and talk about your personal experience, because your personal experience is going to be similar yet completely different than another applicant's. So be true to yourself and who you are, and put your heart into that personal statement, because it will definitely come across. You know, other than that, you know, the basic looking over your essay and, you know, editing it and things like that, you know, that comes secondary. But as long as you put your passion into it, but yet still being concise, you're good to go. Okay, so other than that though, I'm gonna go and do some of my school stuff as well. But look out for my next video. If you have any questions at all, don't ever hesitate to reach out. I try to answer as many of y'all as possible. I know a couple of y'all have mentioned or messaged me on Instagram, and I'm getting back to those as well. And yeah, if you ever need me, reach me at Awesome Life Official on Instagram. And I believe my email is on there as well. But good luck to everybody, and you can do it.